After a military coup in Uruguay, three revolutionary leaders, Mujica, Mauricio, and Eleuterio, are captured and transferred to a different prison for solitary confinement. Upon their arrival, they are blindfolded, stripped of their clothing, and handcuffed before being placed in separate cells. Almost immediately, military officers attempt to suffocate them, but the men manage to survive, enduring pain and forced to stand until the next morning. The next day, they are allowed to remove their blindfolds and discover a wall inscription that warns them to give up hope. They receive letters from the Ministry of Defense prohibiting any communication with each other or the guards. As they struggle to find sleep, soldiers disturb them by banging on their doors. After a year, they are moved again, this time to a cell that includes a bed, though the conditions remain harsh. The military chief pays a visit, threatening them, while specifically warning Mauricio about his family's visits. The men receive haircuts and are given a chance to bathe. During a family visit, Mauricio feels joy, until his father suddenly collapses, prompting him to call for assistance before being returned to his cell. As Christmas nears, the soldiers celebrate while the three men remain in despair. Eleuterio begins to knock on the wall to see if his friends can hear him. Fortunately, Mauricio is in the adjacent cell and responds, allowing them to communicate through their knocks. Filled with excitement, Eleuterio wishes Mauricio a Merry Christmas using this newfound method. As time goes on, they grow more comfortable communicating, asking each other questions, and even playing an imaginary chess game by relaying their moves. One day, Eleuterio faces a challenge when he needs to use the toilet but struggles because one of his hands is cuffed to a pipe. A soldier is called for assistance. In the restroom, Eleuterio finds a discarded newspaper. When he returns to his cell, he tells Mauricio about the latest news from Uruguay. Meanwhile, Mujica's mental health worsens as he starts hearing voices and seeing things, talking to an imaginary version of his mother. Interestingly, Mujica's real mother comes to visit that day, but the soldiers refuse to let her see him and make her wait in the rain. That night, the men are moved to a different prison, where they find rats in their cells. Although the cell is large, the soldiers limit their movement inside. The men have trouble sleeping as an officer named Barriola loudly talks about a girl he likes. Mauricio interrupts and offers to help Barriola win her over if he brings him a pen and paper. Even though the soldiers are angry at Mauricio for speaking up, Barriola is so infatuated that he brings the supplies, allowing Mauricio to help him write a note to the girl. Afterward, Barriola takes the note and leaves. The next day, a group of soldiers takes Mauricio to another room, where Sergeant Alzamora asks if he is the writer who assisted Barriola. Mauricio confirms this, and Alzamora mentions he also wants to ask a girl out. Mauricio writes a letter for him, which impresses Alzamora. In a good mood, Alzamora lets Mauricio keep the writing supplies before sending him back to his cell. A few days later, Alzamora calls for Mauricio again, and this time he receives a proper meal. Alzamora shares more about the girl he likes, and Mauricio helps him plan his next steps and writes another letter. Later that day, while listening to a football match on the radio, Alzamora turns up the volume so that Mauricio and the other prisoners can hear when a goal is scored, which excites Mauricio and his fellow inmates. Mauricio ends up writing another letter for Alzamora, who has received more updates about the girl. That night, the hostages are moved again. During their trip, which lasts into the next day, the truck stops so the prisoners can relieve themselves. Taking advantage of the situation, Mauricio asks to have the cloth over his head removed. The soldier in charge agrees a little, letting Mauricio see the sunlight and his surroundings. When they reach the new prison, Mauricio is placed in a cell with a door that is partly open, unlike the others. Meanwhile, Mujica struggles to keep his mind clear and has a nightmare where a police officer kills him. Eleuterio also faces difficulties as he starts to think back on his past and imagines his wife with him in the cell. After a few days, the prisoners are moved to another prison. Despite the frequent transfers, Eleuterio and Mauricio keep in touch by knocking on the walls. The next day, the prisoners are shocked when soldiers bring in unexpected items like a table, chair, books, a radio, and extra food for their cells. After a few days of enjoying these new comforts, the prisoners realize it was all part of a plan by the soldiers. The soldiers wanted them to feel better treated before their meeting with the International Red Cross Committee Review Board. When the meeting time comes, the prisoners are taken for interviews. Before entering, soldiers warn them not to speak negatively about their conditions or treatment. Eleuterio is the first to be interviewed and sees this as a chance to share their true suffering. However, with a soldier watching him, he chooses to follow instructions and only answer the questions. After the interviews, the prisoners return to their cells only to find that the soldiers have quickly removed all the extra items ending their brief relief from harsh conditions. Days later, the military commander comes to speak with Eleuterio. During a search of his cell, soldiers find a bar of soap with strange markings. The commander thinks Eleuterio is trying to send a secret message. However, Eleuterio proves that the markings are just random codes without any real meaning. The military commander, feeling embarrassed about his error, tries to laugh it off, but admits with regret that he wishes he had eliminated Eleuterio and the others when he had the opportunity. It is revealed that on the day Eleuterio and his companions were captured, the military had just declared they had seized control of the government through a coup. Later, while hiding in a house with friends, Eleuterio senses an unsettling quiet in the area. The homeowner, likely a friend of Eleuterio, decides to give herself up to the soldiers. She steps outside only to see armed soldiers pointing their weapons at the house. A tense silence envelops the scene as Eleuterio anxiously waits to see if the soldiers will accept the surrender. Suddenly, the soldiers start firing indiscriminately, killing the woman and her husband inside. The shooting continues for a while, and although Eleuterio is caught in the chaos, the other man hiding with him remains safe. The military chief commands the soldiers to enter the house. When they find no one else, they wait for higher-ranking officials to arrive. As the officials investigate, it becomes evident that the soldiers had placed weapons in the hands of the dead couple to make it look like they had shot first. While examining the scene, one soldier heads to the restroom and sees blood dripping from the ceiling, indicating that there are people hiding above. He reports this to the military chief. To avoid raising suspicion, the chief quietly goes to the restroom to check for himself. Just as he prepares to shoot, Eleuterio's partner yells that they are in the ceiling and have surrendered. This interrupts the chief's plan to kill them as two officials enter and order the soldiers to rescue the men. In the present, the military chief tells Eleuterio that he deserves nothing but punishment. The following day, Mujica finally meets his mother, who brings him some belongings. However, he is not in a good state and abruptly tells her to stop coming, worried they might harm her because of him. He shares his struggles with hearing things and his wish to stop thinking, which overwhelms him in his cell. His mother begs him to get his mind straight to avoid danger, but Mujica feels confused and doesn't know how to do that. During a prison event, Mujica starts yelling for the items his mother brought. As he gets louder and disrupts the event, soldiers come to his cell to silence him. Mujica then threatens to reveal one soldier's secret affair by shouting details at the event, successfully getting what he wants. Worried about his actions, the soldiers decide to inform their superiors. The next day, Mujica sees a doctor and talks about his feelings, including hearing voices. The doctor diagnoses him with delusional psychosis, gives him medication, and suggests he needs more sleep. Mujica insists he doesn't need sleep but wants to read and write to sort out his thoughts. Although the doctor is doubtful at first, she agrees to give him books and encourages him to hold on, saying his suffering is almost over, a comment Mujica doesn't understand. A few days later, the prisoners are moved to another prison, where they can walk under supervision with their heads covered. Mujica also receives the books promised by the doctor. The following day, the prisoners are transferred to a new location, which turns out to be Alzamora's prison. Mauricio is happy to see the sergeant, who shares that he has married the woman Mauricio helped him write to. Grateful, Alzamora offers Mauricio anything he desires, and Mauricio requests time in the yard with his friends. That afternoon, the three men meet again for the first time in years, and they are truly joyful. After spending a long time in jail, the men are ready for release, with Mujica being the first to leave. As he steps out, he is asked to sign a paper stating he was treated well during his time in prison. Even though he knows they were mistreated, Mujica signs it reluctantly, as it is the final step to his freedom. The soldier in charge gives him one last threat, saying they will keep an eye on him, but Mujica simply wishes him well before departing. Eleuterio and Mauricio are also set to be released. They board a bus heading towards a crowd eagerly waiting for their return. After a long journey, they finally reunite with their families after 12 years in solitary confinement. In the years that follow, Eleuterio becomes a senator and defense minister, Mauricio becomes a poet and novelist, and Mujica is elected as a congressman before becoming the president of Uruguay in 2010. Please like and subscribe for more amazing recaps like this.